And again, we have a Secretary of Defense who's on bed rest, who was missing or not in touch, or nobody was looking for him for days. So how does the administration at this point still keep the American public in the dark with the president, calling a lid tonight? This seems like I can't imagine this having happened in the Trump administration.
Well, it wouldn't have for several reasons. Either President Trump would be under wing or in the press briefing room or calling reporters into the Oval Office. If it were later into the night, maybe he'd be firing off a couple of tweets that we were told were so chaotic and so crisis-laden. But at least then you would know what the commander-in-chief was thinking. You would also have spokespeople from the Department of Defense. Look, I think that the Secretary of Defense being absent all those days should concern everyone because they basically proved he's not a vital part of the conversation here, of the coordination. Laura, this is exactly why who's commander-in-chief is important. And when you stop designating terrorists as terrorists, you're inviting them to be terrorists again. And you're inviting them to threaten America, her interests, her people, and her values, her freedom. I think what the gentleman was just saying is incredibly important because when people look at this, they say, this is not some distant fight that's not ours. People are so concerned now that what's happening there is affecting us here. And this is why President Trump long ago pivoted to a general election strategy against Biden. He wants you to think about their two presidencies, their two administrations. Sure, economy, energy, border. But this particularly, as he said last night in Fox News' town hall, first president in 72 years to not start a new war. We called terrorists. We brought hostages home. If you look at Iran, who funds so much of what we're talking about in this world, it's so scary. When you look at Iran, they were starving to make deals by the time we left our administration. Now they basically produce 3 million barrels a day. They stockpiled over 80 billion. You know where it's going. You see on the screen where it's going. But Laura and Molly, I think this is why, even in the personal attribute questions, Trump is beating Biden. Who has a plan? Who cares about the middle class? Who has the energy and ability? Who has the vision and experience? But also on all the major issues, security and affordability, people are very concerned, and they're against Biden. I think they're hiding Biden. Do you know, last point, we've heard more about and from Hunter Biden than Joe Biden the last 2 days. We've seen more of Hunter than Joe Biden.
Molly.
Disgrace.
Well, it was interesting last night. One of the questions that was asked at the town hall was about some concern that people might have that chaos would return if Trump were elected. And Trump's answer was pointing out some of the chaos that we're seeing in the country right now, not just domestically, but internationally. And this is a really serious situation. I mean, it's a serious situation that the Houthis have been bombing shipping routes and that affects so many things. Something needs to be done about this. But we've also been in conflict, either in a proxy way or otherwise, with these people for quite some time now. This is the third administration. And you want to have good communication with the American people. You also want to do things in a constitutional manner. And again, Biden is not the first president to violate what the Constitution says about how Congress should be involved when launching airstrikes. But this is a good example of why Congress should be involved, because we do need to think about, to the point that...
What's next?
Yeah. Well, and also how we're going to deal with this. Being involved in a global conflict in multiple parts...
When we're broke.
Yes. And it matters to people, and how we do it matters. And it doesn't seem like a lot of our defense industry or that our defense leadership have been thinking about how to effectively win wars. They're very good about entering into them.
Well, we haven't won a war since World War II.
Right. They're very good about having them go for a long time.
78 years? What is that?
But we need to know more about what their strategy is before we let them do yet another one.
I think, Billy Joel saying it's a matter of trust. Who's trusting what's happening here? And that's why you really do have to have someone in place. You can say, okay, even if we disagree with this action, they're laying it out for us. Peace through strength. That's what President Trump talked about last night. And when you have a weak economy, when you're self-loathing, I'll talk about this in a little bit, you're teaching people to hate your country. You're supporting the pro-Hamas protesters on college campuses. Maybe they're going to be supporting the Houthis tomorrow.
I think this is why Trump right now is realigning what's the traditional Democratic coalition of voters. I mean, he's really burrowing into Hispanics and African Americans, independents, first-time voters who are young or maybe not young. Maybe they're just first-time voters, Laura. But the other thing here is that we made it the party of the worker. We made it it was an administration that was there for the worker. When you even talk to Iowa's caucus goers, they're mentioning things like this. They're not just talking about inflation. They're not just talking about the cost of gas and groceries and the border crisis. They're talking about what's going on all around the world, the hot spots. And we were told crisis in a tweet, chaos and palace intrigue. There's crisis and chaos everywhere we look. Everywhere you look is a hot
back
spot.
At them once again.
But remember, the adults will now be in charge.
yes.
And see what's happened there. But, we do have a real different vision here of foreign policy. And I think we were robbed of that in the 2020 election to have an actual debate about whose foreign policy was better. It was kind of asserted by corporate media that Biden had a better foreign policy. And we now have this unique situation where we can just compare the 4 years under the Trump administration with the 4 years under Biden and see who had just objectively speaking, a far better record.
Does that not speak to the fact that the U.S. media has so fallen down on its job to first vet Joe Biden in 2020? He was not up to the job. Everybody knew it, and they hid it for him. He was a hologram candidate, and he's a hologram president who calls the lid on a night like tonight. This is a failure across the board of the elites, the establishment, and the corporate media, Molly. You hit this every day. They have a lot to be accountable here tonight.
Yeah, and they're very much responsible for getting us into this situation by failing to vet. And it's why it's so important that people are able to have a good evaluation of what they're getting into.
There's one reason. The name is Trump. Everything flows from Trump. If you challenge anyone to answer a question about Joe Biden as our commander-in-chief, or our foreign policy, or the Secretary of Defense being missing, and you ask them to answer the question, Laura and Molly, they can't go 10 words or 10 seconds without saying Trump 5 times. They're so obsessed with him, and so the Trump derangement syndrome is real. There's no vaccine, no therapeutic for it. And it's so real that it was okay not to vet him. It's okay to lie. It's okay to pretend that what you see, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, not up to the task while we are at war in so many places, including at our southern border. That's okay because the alternative is Trump. It's outrageous.
I actually think that's part of the reason why they have such hatred toward Trump. You remember in 2016 they said if he were elected, we would have nuclear conflict. We would have conflict all over the world. He wouldn't be up to handling the task of all these global issues in play. And then when he not only won, which surprised so many people, but then did such an effective job, and you see even again with the town hall last night, where he had pretty effective responses to these questions that were being asked. I actually think that's part of the reason why people hate him so much, is that they resent that he has command and control and is funny and is engaging with people.
This was all over the internet 12 hours ago that this was going to take place. President Trump was dining with President Xi of China at Mar-a-Lago. And I was between the main course and dessert. We unleashed a missile attack against one of our adversaries. Nobody knew about it.
Syria.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember it very well. He said
didn't have a 12-hour notice that this was going to happen.
Nope. He said that crazy person gassed kids, and here's my response. But isn't that funny too? We were told we were the leakers. Nobody even knew things like that were happening as they were happening. And what does President Trump? He even said it last night in the Fox News town hall. He said they broadcast everything, or he said it in an interview recently, they broadcast everything. You don't tell your enemies what you're going to do before you do it. They're your enemies for a reason. We don't have this kind of discipline. We don't have this kind of coordination and collaboration right now because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, as a number one and number two in our nation's government, make otherwise smart people say really stupid things all the time.
We have a cabinet of firsts, and then we have Tony Blinken, who started his tenure as Secretary of State essentially getting lectured by China. Remember that meeting in Alaska? And now, headline in the New York Times, Blinken talks a grand vision for Mideast peace, but hits a wall in Israel. Strikes expand battleground for the West, for the war in the Middle East.
I mean, it's not surprising. There's been a very muddled vision there. There have been mixed messages about what our role is with Israel and